I'm happy to introduce Dr. Hillel Mali, who is a scholar of the Hebrew Bible and ancient Jewish literature at Bar-Ilan University. His research focuses on the interrelations between theology and ritual, as well as on the development of law in the Hebrew Bible, the Qumran literature, and early rabbinic literature. For our conference, Hillel Mali will speak on a tale of two houses, from Haggai's this house to Ezra's first house.
תשובה, יונתן, להמשך השיחה שלנו. Okay. Good morning. Thank you, Tova and Shalom and all the organizers. It's a great pleasure to be in a sanctuary within time, in times of flood and storm everywhere. So thank you for this opportunity. Can? Okay, בסדר. So let's start. A beautiful Aggadic tale from the Palestinian Talmud describes Choni HaMe'agel, a Jerusalemite holy man on the eve of the destruction of the first temple, going out to visit his workers. When rain began to fall, Choni sought shelter in a cave and fell asleep. During his sleep, 70 years passed, in which the temple was destroyed and rebuilt. Choni awoke, emerged from the cave, and saw a strange world upon which history had left its marks. Vineyards replaced by olive groves by grain fields, and his townspeople, encountering the stranger, asked him, "Man at, who are you?" The solution to Choni's estrangement, to what we can define as a rabbinic odyssey, lies, as Moshe Simon Shushan beautifully wrote, in the sacred space. The story tells us that the townspeople remember that their ancestor used to say that the temple would light up when Choni approached. Choni, indeed, entered the temple courtyard, and it lit up. The legend reflects a tension between historical time in which the world changed beyond recognition, ken chama alma michlaf. He saw a different world, and ritual time through which the destruction appears as but a dream. Choni fell asleep as the temple shone upon him, and awoke to find it shining again. Outside, the world is destroyed. Inside, the light is perpetual. A similar sense of continuity appears in the famous legends that you're all familiar with in 2 Maccabees, which recounts how the priest hid the altar fire in a pit following the destruction. When the exile ended, Nehemiah sent their descendants to retrieve the fire, but all they found was thick water. Nehemiah commanded them to bring the water to Jerusalem and pour it on their wood, and when the sun shone forth, a great fire flared up. The temple was destroyed, but the fire is eternal. However, the attempt to lock the cavalry of history out of the temple gates and keep it outside the threshold of ritual time ultimately failed. The Aggadot in the book of Maccabees and in the Talmuds did not suppress the fact that the destruction broke something very deep within the sacred space. Indeed, even the tale of the fire in Maccabees itself recounts how the fire was rekindled in the temple, but the ark and the vessels remained hidden until the day when the Lord will reveal these things and the glory of the Lord will be seen, so that the place shall be greatly sanctified. The tension between ritual continuity and the manic depressive nature of history led me to think about the tension inherent in the numerical designations that distinguish the first from the second temple, terms that reflects the intrusion of history into the sacred space. In this lecture, I will try to answer a very, very simple question. Who was the first to call the first temple the first temple? This, in turn, opens into a more profound question concerning the relationship between historical and ritual time. First, I will trace the earliest textual evidence of the distinction between the first and second temple and show that it was born as a result of sophisticated literary reworking of Haggai's prophecy in Ezra. Second, I will show that the distinction between the temples is reflected in the Hebrew version of Cyrus' declaration, but maybe not in the Aramaic version. Third, I will propose an explanation for the emergence of the distinction between the first temple and second temple. So let's begin with a verse that appeared in this conference 3 times until now. In the prophecy, and will show again, in the prophecy of Haggai, the prophet promises the people that גדול יהיה כבוד הבית הזה, האחרון מן הראשון, כן, במקום הזה יתן שלום, נאום השם צבאות. The words bite, house, and kavod, glory, are both masculine singular, making it difficult to determine which noun the adjective האחרון, later, and הראשון, former, modify. If they modify bite, can house, the verse means the glory of this house shall be greater than of the former. If they modify kavod, glory, the meaning is the later glory of this house shall be greater than its former glory, of its glory. The first interpretation appears in Second Temple literature, rabbinic midrashim, medieval commentators, and some modern commentaries and translations. However, as several commentators have already noted, the second interpretation is more accurate, since in verse 3 it is said, מי בכם הנשאר אשר ראה את הבית הזה בכבודו הראשון ומה אתם רואים אותו עתה לא חמור כעין בעיניכם. This demonstrates that in the prophecy the adjective ראשון is attached to the noun כבוד. It does not say מי בכם הנשאר אשר ראה את הבית הזה הראשון בכבודו. And the comparison is between the former glory and the later glory of the very same house. The significance of this observation is that in the prophet's language there is no distinction between the first house and the second. Habayit hazeh refers in the prophecy of Haggai to the destroyed temple, Solomon's temple, and the temple in its future state. The first text to distinguish between the first temple and the second temple is found in a late layer of the book of Ezra Nehemiah, namely in the Hebrew account of the temple's foundation. There, it is said that after the builders laid the foundation of the temple of the Lord, Ken Yisdu Abonim et Echal Hashem, and set up priests and Levites to give prize for the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid in Al-Usad Bet Adonai, weeping mingled with joy. ורבים מהכהנים והלוויים וראשי האבות הזקנים אשר ראו את הבית הראשון ביוסדו, זה הבית בעיניהם, בוכים בקול גדול, ורבים בשמחה בתרועה להרים קול. ורבים בתרועה בשמחה, להרים קול. Ezra terminological innovation is surprising in light of its thematic and linguistic proximity to Haggai's description of the temple foundation. These are the only two texts in the Bible that describe the celebration of temple foundation, in contrast to Ezra Chitzoni and Josephus and etc. Both do so using the word combination of Yesad plus Hechal Hashem. The protagonists are identical, Zerubbabel ben Shaltiel and Yoshua ben Yotzadak. In both sources there is a focus on the emotional response of the spectators arising from the comparison of the current temple to memories of the previous temple, and using a similar language. כן, אשר ראו את הבית הראשון ביוסדו, אשר ראה את הבית הזה בכבודו, etc. It is almost the same verse. These affinities show, as some scholars have argued from the beginning of the 20th century, that the author of Ezra used Haggai's prophecy to create his own account. He revoked the living prophetic dialogue, which addresses the builders in the second person, into a third-person historical description with one important difference related to our discussion. For the author of Ezra, the temple of the returnees from the exile is distinguished from Solomon's temple. Therefore, it cannot be said that those who were left saw this house as in Haggai, since this house refers to a new and different temple. Consequently, the author omitted the incorrect demonstrative pronoun, retained the word former, harishon, and reassigned it from hakavod, the glory, to habayit, the house, thereby creating, for the first time, the phrase habayit harishon, the first house. The shift of the adjective harishon from its function as a modifier of kavod to a modifier of bayit left the demonstrative pronoun hazeh stranded. The author of Ezra then used it to designate the current house in the following clause. אשר ראה את הבית הזה בכבודו הראשון, אשר ראו את הבית הראשון ביוסדו, זה הבית בעיניהם. The author reordered the words placing the demonstrative pronoun before the noun, and thus transformed the common phrase "habayit hazeh," meaning simply "habayit," into a phrase distinguishing between the first house and the second, this house, as opposed to the previous one. Thus, from the prophet's formulation, which spoke of one house with a first and later glory, two distinct houses were created, the first house and this house. Attentiveness to the linguistic innovation of Ezra Hebrew narrative reveals a nuanced discrepancy between the Hebrew and Aramaic version of Cyrus' declaration. In the Aramaic version, the house is definite. This definiteness reflects a meaningful narrative feature which appear both in the letters and in the Aramaic narrative framework. In the account of Tatnai's mission, the elders are asked, Man sam lechom ta'em baita da libneh, who issued you a decree to rebuild this house? And they respond that Cyrus commanded, Bet Elahad na libneh, and this house of God shall be rebuilt. The definite Bet Elah and the demonstrative pronoun dna provide political justification for the construction. This is not the building of a new temple, but rather a restoration of an ancient destroyed temple. As the returning exiles said in their letter to Tatnai, Ken banayin baita dihava bna mikadmat dena shanin sagian. And we are rebuilding the house that was built many years ago. The house that was built and destroyed, uvait adna satre, is the house that will be built, Bet Elahad na libneh, on its original sites, itbaneh al atare. Similar language appears in the Elephantine letters concerning the restoration of the temple, where the member of the community requests to build the altar house, Bet Madbecha, and emphasize that this is the house that was built formerly, which was formerly built in the fortress of Yev. It was destroyed, and therefore it should be rebuilt in its place as it was before, Lemivne Beatre, Kazia Belekadmin. This is also consistent with the rhetoric of Persian king who, as Andrew Davis has shown, refer to the restoration temples rather than to their new construction. Against this background, the fact that in the opening of the Hebrew version of Cyrus' declaration, the house is indefinite, is surprising. Livnot lo bait. It seems like he says, let's build something new here, to build him a house. It is self-evident that this temple is identified with the previous temple. Indeed, already in the second verse of the declaration, the house is definite. Even at Bet Hashem Elohei Israel, and let him build the house of the Lord, the God of Israel, and not by even Bait LaHashem Elohei Israel. However, it seems that the choice of Livnot Bait, to build a house, implying a new house, is not accidental. It aligns with the description of the foundation of the second temple in chapter 3, with the absence of demonstrative pronouns that appears frequently in the Aramaic narrative. It does not say, let him build this house, and it appears in two additional places. If this difference is not accidental, and I'm not sure, it fits well with the conceptual innovation we have noted, the distinction made by the Hebrew narrator of Ezra between Habayit Rishon, the first house, and Habayit Hazeh, this house, uproot the term Habayit Hazeh from its original meaning, where this house is the first house, and gives it a new meaning, this house, as something different from the first, thereby creating a separate name for the first house, Habayit Rishon, distinguishing it from the current one. What is the key to this conceptual innovation? It seemed to me that the key to the terminological innovation is found in the literary context in which the designation of the first house first appears. The terminological distinction between the temples does not appear in a neutral historical context as a chronological definition that helps the author distinguish between periods and assign events to named areas. I think that the first occurrence of such use of the terms appears in the rabbinic literature, where the term Habayit Harishon and the Habayit Hashani used not as in a modern scholarship. It's not a name of a period, but used to describe the full area. I count 853 occurrences in the rabbinic literature, and I'm trying to make order for all of this. This is the field where I came from. But so the use of these terms as a periodical, as a designation to a period, this is something that I think start in the rabbinic literature, maybe earlier, and I'm not familiar with the term. but I didn't find any trace of this in Second Temple literature. Rather, it appears in the context of the elders weeping at the sight of the house being built. The weeping, it seemed to me, explained the birth of this innovation perfectly. Both texts describe the temple's foundation and the elders' emotional response. However, the prophet, active at the beginning of the returning from the exile, nullifies disappointment as nothing in your eyes with concrete immediate promises. It shall be great, כן, ועוד אחת מעתי, הנני מרעיש. It will happen tomorrow. There is no difference, this will be great, etc., etc. He tried with all his promises to break or to nullify or to disappear the feeling of concealing the gap between memory and reality. By contrast, in Ezra, which postdates Haggai by 1 to 300 years, it depends on very heavy questions that we'll discuss here later in this conference, this difference between the temples has transformed from crisis into unreality. The author knows well that the house is not like the previous one. Indeed, Ezra accounts omits the divine glory entering the temple, describing instead a bittersweet mixture of joy and weeping. Therefore, as long as the new structure proposed to constitute a direct and miraculous continuation of the former, it remains the same house. But the moment it becomes clear that this is not the same house, it's a wonderful song in Hebrew, זה לא אותו הבית, זה לא אותו העמק, אתם אינכם ולא תוכלו לשוב. A need arises to distinguish it from its predecessor. Thus the first house and this house became different houses. This can be further clarified through linguistic attention to the third account of the temple's foundations that appears in the animal vision. According to the vision, the first temple was great and lofty. The second was only called, הנקרא גבוה, it was only called the higher tower, because God dwelled in the first, and the sacrifice were pure, whereas in the second, God did not dwell, and the sacrifice were impure. This diminutive language, only called, reflects tension between the structure and its name. It exists, but is unworthy of its title. And in the Noah Mizrahi thesis and Jonathan Bender, if I remember correctly, there is a footnote about the use of the term hanikra in Ben Sira and Enoch literature and rabbinic literature to reflect this gap, this discrepancy between structure or between object or between a man to his titles. And it's something that we found in different documents in the Second Temple literature. This gap explains Ezra's distinction between the first house and this house, the house not identical to the true house. In fact, I believe, the distinction between the first and Second Temple in Second Temple literature function not as a chronological marker, but as a ritual distinction explaining the status of the Second Temple. This is also the case in Tobit 14:5, which states that after the destruction, a temple will be rebuilt that will not be as magnificent as the first. Protos, according to Sinaiticus, or the former, according to Vaticanus. I do not know whether the text refers only to Ezra or also to Haggai. It's mentioned there the prophets, or maybe Haggai is in his head, but either way, the use of the designation, the first, is used to offer a solution to the meagerness of the current house. The author distinguished between the first temple, the proper one, and the diminished state of the present, which is only resolved by the promise of the building to be built at the end of the days. And in it, the temple of God will be rebuilt, just as the prophet of Israel have said concerning it. In other words, the distinction between this temple and the first is intended to transfer the hopes of the temple to the eschatological temple. The second led to the third. Theological significance for the designation first is also found in the writing of Josephus, especially in Herod's speech regarding the renovation of the temple. And it's appearing in Josephus' Antiquity, but assigned maybe to sources of Josephus, or maybe it's the 1st century BCE, but we don't know for sure. According to Josephus, according maybe to Nicolaus Ish Damasek, previous generations lacked the means to build a temple with the magnificent dimensions of the first temple, and thus they built a smaller structure. Josephus calls Solomon's temple the first temple. While this could be interpreted as a purely chronological label, he immediately adds that the returnees exile did not have the opportunity to rebuild the first archetype of proper worship on the same scale. In Josephus' phrasing, the first house was constructed according to the first pattern. This unique expression, it appears just one time in all Josephus' writing. It appears, I think, 50 times in Philo, in the writing of Philo. It's an echo of the biblical expression tavnit, namely the pattern of the tabernacle the God showed Moses. Thus, the first temple is not merely the earlier one, it is the temple that corresponds to the original pattern as it was first transmitted. In conclusion, the distinction between the first and second temple emerged many years after Haggai's prophecy reminded an unfulfilled promise. The author of Ezra utilized the prophecy, which originally identified the two temples as one, to craft a prosaic description that distinguishes between them. This linguistic shift is also reflected in the Hebrew version of the declaration, which describes the construction of a new house in Jerusalem in one occurrence, in the other it's identified with the earlier, but not in the Aramaic version. The ritual tone accompanying the ordinal number first and second is preserved as a bitter aftertaste in the account of Josephus, who laments the loss of the first pattern, and it serves as a historiographic foundation for the eschatological hopes for the building of a final true house. If we return to Choni's cave, from which we set out, the first temple itself became just a dream to which the dwellers in the dust shall eventually awaken.
Questions, comments?
The whole point is just this picture, so I will lay
You want to give us a picture?
this. Oh.
Close to home.
First and second, kind of. Okay.
And much
Okay.
beyond. And much
Yeah.
beyond. Yeah. Questions, comments?
So,
Jonathan, it's just an answer for you. It's all discussion.
Remember that I
Okay.
forgot all
Okay.
about it. First of all, that was brilliant. I mean, this distinction of in Haggai. I have two things to say. First of all, this emphasis on the place, in the place where it has built, rebuilding the thing where it has built, is not only political, it's also cultic. You know, when you,
Right.
you read in, you know,
Kalu.
when Nabunaid
Right.
rebuilds the
Right.
Efulchul
Right.
and all these places, he
Right.
says, I just placed it in the first place where it was, and I used the same blueprint, and I didn't change anything. So a lot of it is cultic. It's not only political.
Absolutely.
My other comment to you, maybe you would consider that the word Bichvodo Harishon, so Harishon in Haggai, is a gloss.
Mhm.
Is a gloss meant to be, because, you know, Bichvodo Harishon, it's a linguistic point. I wonder what you would do, what's the natural way in biblical Hebrew to say the former.
Mhm.
In Malachi, ki yimei olam uchshanim kadmoniyot, maybe kekedem or something like that. So I wonder whether Harishon, you have another example for that in as the norm in biblical Hebrew. And therefore I would consider that Harishon is just a gloss, maybe after Ezra, just
Yeah,
to complicate things.
Okay. If you accept your offer, so just to conclude our conversation half years ago, if you accept your new offer now that Harishon is a gloss, it's make it much better. He invests a lot of efforts to combine all the different houses into one, and there is no even, different strata. Yes, I will need to think about it. Thank you.
About the kavod.
Yes,
Do you think that is a reference to the divine presence?
absolutely, yes. Yeah, I know for sure, that all the commentators of Haggai, think that kavod is something that has to do with all the wellness and that everybody bring to Jerusalem.
But kavod could also
Yeah,
be...
but you cannot speak about temple and building the temple and mention the word. I cannot understand this kind of interpretations that think maybe the wellness that will come to Jerusalem is something that reflects the divine. We can think about Ezekiel, כן? והנה בקולו ככל מים רבים, והארץ העירה מכבודו. So we see, I know what Ariel will say about it, but we see the kvodo enter to the city in some places, in Ezekiel 40, and then water came forth from Jerusalem. So there is a connection between materiality and wellness to do divine. It's a deep theological question. But it's related to the kavod that entered to the city, what is completely absent from Ezra. It's the only occurrence of Chanukhat Habayit that there is no glory that entered to the house. It's an empty house.
You have to name ikavod.
Ikavod, right.
When the ark is gone.
Right.
And there is no divine
Right.
presence.
Thank you for the name. Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
I mean, this is very intriguing to me, and I'm not a biblical scholar, so I'm just really accepting what you're telling me, but I'm just intrigued by the huge difference we see in Babylonia at the same time, where in Uruk the temple is literally called the Resh temple. The clearly reconstructed new temple is called Resh. It's called the first one, right? So it's a huge difference.
Again, what they call it? Please explain it a little bit.
Resh.
Yes.
Rosh, the original one, the Ur temple, right? So I'm very intrigued by this difference, and obviously we read it through the lens of then what the rabbis do with it, like where they really pick it up and run with it because they're, living in a post-Second Temple time. But I'm very intrigued by what it is doing in Ezra itself, and I like your explanation of it's eschatological, and it expresses the hope for what's going to happen in the Third Temple. But then I'm very intrigued why that's not the same, or why in Babylonia their Second Temple was satisfying enough for them not to have to go to such an extent. There's no question here. I'm just
this is such an important comment. So I just read all the Andrew Davis books that they make a distinction between the rhetoric of the Babylonian rebuilding temples and the Persian author, and thinking about that in some part of the Babylonian kings are trying to build something new, and etc. And the Persian. I tried to make a connection to the biblical literature, but I didn't succeed yet. Now I will return to, you will send me this reference and I will check it, but I have nothing to say. So I don't know. I thought in the beginning maybe in the Hellenistic time we found in Apollo the temples that we have a distinction between the temples that make from gold and then silver and then bronze and etc. And a very development of a concept of the difference between the different layer of the temple itself, but it's just a thought. So thank you. I will take the reference and check it. Thank you. Yes.
I also just have some thoughts, but I think I was also impressed by what you were arguing. Two things. One, I was also very confused why it's Rishon rather than some root of Kedem. And I'm wondering if this is really sort of the idea that this is the archetype rather than former in any possible way. I don't know if linguistically it works that way. And even in further support, the Elephantine data that you were talking about, there is a minority argument that says Yadanya, who wrote that letter, invented that tradition. And invented it would have been for the same reasons that you're talking about. And I think almost all of the clear evidence archaeologically and also supported with other administrative texts, it is an invented tradition. He may have actually believed it was original, but it wasn't there. And that became part of his motivation for making an argument to the governor of Yehud, not to the Persian bureau at Saqqara, but to the governor of Yehud to convince Saqqara to rebuild his damaged temple now. So it's probably in great support of what you're doing to look at that minority argument.
Thank you. I'm also, confused between the political justification for this rhetoric of the temples and the relationship between the first and the second, and the theological tones that maybe the words has acquired. Jonathan said earlier that maybe I cannot. You will tell me, or Omri here will tell us whether the Rishon itself is something like. In Josephus, it's a hapax legomenon. He said archetype, and it's the first time he felt a need to use a different Greek word to describe the essence of this relation between the different temples. I didn't think, like Jonathan said, that Rishon here has a tone of, like Tavnit or something like ideal type of temple. But Omri, what do you think? What?
Something to investigate, but my tentative thought is that maybe Rosh is the beginning point instead of Kedem, which is like former. Maybe Rosh Rishon gets back to the Rashid, to the beginning.
Yes.
The beginning, which is even stronger, maybe.
Yeah. Thank you. So I will check it. Thank you.
Shalom, you've been waiting. I can shalom.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. I wonder if you could expand a little bit on the original theology, right? Before we get with Gloss or whatever, or Ezra, what are they thinking when they see, right? You brilliantly exposed the tension between something was destroyed, something is built, right? And so and then there's a tension, right? This is clearly not what was, and yet somehow at least the Chagai Kvodo Harishon, right, is asking us to imagine that this Habayit Hazeh is Habayit Hazeh. Right, and so along the lines of what Jonathan said, like we dig this up and we understand that I've dug up the former and I've put it, I haven't, right? So I wonder if we could expand on that theology. It's a brilliant thing, right? This religious idea that ignore whatever you see here, right? Wizard of Oz. Yes, this is the same thing. I wonder if you could expand a little bit more on this idea.
I could.
Please do.
I could.
Go ahead.
I spent all my earlier career in archaeology, and the most amazing archaeological stuff that I've seen in Jerusalem in my short life was what Tova knows very well, and Oded Lifshitz and Yuval Gadot and Yana Shechanovich and Doron Ben-Ami, all the archaeologists that deal with it, that if part of you doesn't visit the place, in the bottom of Givati Park. Thursday. So I will not steal, but you can see, Shalom. Tears came from my eyes when I touched it for the first time. You can really see the first temple building with such a huge amount, of all the vanilla and the vessels and the bones and etc. It's the glorious house that ever found in Jerusalem from Second Temple period. And then you can see a very thin wall that continued the first house. And this is from the Persian period. I think nobody disagree with Yuval Gadot about it today. So you really see from one side the declination of their ability to build, the declination of the sides. It's, I think, third העובי של הקירות, the thick of the walls. It's just a third from the or maybe even a quarter of the first temple period, but they still live there. And the Oded Lifshitz wrote, I think 1 year ago, a wonderful article speaking about that there has an intention to continue to live in the Choravot, continue to live within the destroyed house, because we can see that nobody clean, the area. They still stick, you can think about Gei Ben Hinnom, Birkat Kohanim, to bury your dead in the same cave, to continue the use. That's what we don't know from which, age the Birkat Kohanim came from. So there is a deep sense of continuity of people that lived within the destruction and trying to rebuild the same destruction. The problem is that no one could say what's happened in Temple Mount. Mm-hmm. Does Haggai speak about, our building a temple or building a temple? Does Zechariah don't speak about a temple, but the second or third or later layer of Zechariah or whatever happened speaking about a temple, whether there is a new project or they use the same. So it's a philological question that's relating to the text, and an archaeological question that cannot be solved because we don't know what happened there. But judge according to City of David excavation, the destruction was very partially. The walls stand in Jerusalem. So this gives a sense of continuity from the point of view of physical structure of Jerusalem. I don't know who wrote Ezra 1 to 3. I don't know exactly from which period this document, and I don't know, the Abait Benem, it's for sure a gloss in Ezra 1, 3:12. So we don't know. What I can say is that in the animal vision in Enoch and in Tobit, it's a little bit different eschatological hope. Maybe it's not eschatological, it's almost prophetical hope. And in Josephus, and in temple, in different documents from Second Temple period, the ikavod, as Carl just said, it's everywhere. It's Chazal, it's Qumran scroll in a different way, but the theological perceptions that the temple is ikavod, there is no, it's almost everywhere. So maybe theology overcome the reality of continuity, maybe not. That's what I can say. Can.
Thank you, Hillel. Continuing about perhaps what Celine has been referring to, there's a verse in Jeremiah, Kiseh Chavod Marom Mireshon Mekom Mikdashenu.
Right.
So we might suppose that the term Rishon was a name of the temple before its destruction. That Rishon means, the most important place, the most ancient something, but that it was a name of the temple. Abayit HaRishon did not mean the first temple. And then it was reanalyzed in these texts that we're talking about. Is this still the first temple? Then suddenly, okay, if there's a first temple, second temple.
You read it as, please explain your reading.
That one of the names of the temple was Marom Rishon.
Yeah.
The highest since
the beginning.
Like, which is similar to what we have in the Babylonian temples.
Yeah.
And then what we have in this period, in the Persian period, is a semantic reanalysis of this ancient cultic term.
To a periodical.
As a periodical.
Yeah. Amazing.
So, and perhaps
amazing.
maybe in Haggai not yet.
Amazing.
But only in Ezra.
Okay. Of course, I have no answer. I just need to investigate this idea. Thank you, Itai.
What was the reference?
Jeremiah 17:12.
כן. כיסא כבוד מרום ראשון, how the verse continue? כיסא כבוד מרום ראשון, לא, כיסא כבוד מרום ראשון כקום מקדשנו, כן, אוקיי. אוקיי. אוקיי.
Very strange.
כן.
In the context, in a very strange context as well. I should say to pick up on what Shalom said on the theological side of it, that continuity is very important theologically. A break of kind of a destruction is quite a disaster to theological continuation. And one text that I would bring to the discussion of the Solomon Temple, not even the second, would be 2 Samuel 24. Okay, the discussion of what is the actual place of building the altar. Okay, that would be a former story to the establishment of the temple. So the question of whether that place is entitled to be the cultic place is a topic that is dealt with in the biblical texts, I would say, of the first temple. But, here comes things of datings. Yeah. Any other question, please? Please.
Thanks. I was wondering if some of, particularly Josephus and some of the later material, if this isn't later thinking about Herod's work, right? Because they have to justify the fact that he's rebuilt a temple that actually wasn't not there.
Yeah.
Right. So if they have to have, well, he did this, so there must have been something wrong with.
Yes.
But there, and so
Yes.
this is all sort of an anachronistic back projection.
Absolutely. You touch my fear. My demon in this short project is maybe, I am teaching here Second Temple literature, and Second Temple literature in Florilegium and Temple Scroll and Megillat in New Jerusalem Scroll, and everywhere there we are used to say ikavod, as you said. Maybe I projected to Ezra, and it's related to the question that which kind of description Ezra gives us about the temple. The fact that he don't mention any, miraculous revelation in just they say sacrifices about on all the 12 tribes of Israel and something so very prosaic. Does it say something? Does it argumentum de silento, or does he trying to reflect a deep problem in the temple? I assume to interpreting Ezra according to Enoch and Josephus and Tobit and Florilegium. And not to say that this is something that enter later to Second Temple literature, but it depends. I don't know to which period you date Ezra 1 to 3. The disagreement is, between the second, third, fourth century. So, but I read it as a part of this theological convention. Is that the answer? Give you an? If someone want to ask something about Honi, we left him in the cave. The discovery that he lived in the first temple. Hanan, want to?
Thank you, Hillel. It's I think the second or third time that I hear this. So, and I like it very much. I just wonder whether you read too much into the verse in Ezra.
I read too much. What? In the verse of Ezra.
Into the verse in Ezra 3.
Yeah.
Because when the people who saw the first house are crying, it does not necessarily mean that they think that the current house is of lesser degree or of that it worth less than the first house.
Yeah.
So I wonder whether the theological reading of it is it can be just that they know the first house, they didn't believe that they would see it. It doesn't say that they are crying because they don't think it's a good thing what they see.
Yeah.
They are crying because they didn't believe that they would see it rebuilt, and now they see it rebuilt, and they just cry. So
Okay, if you write, I am delete all this lecture, and I completely agree that this is an option. Many commentators think that the cry is something that came, from the Kalu ritual. It's not a spontaneous reaction to the building of the temple. It's something that has to do with the destruction of the first one, and not. I don't know. I am not an expert on this, but I numbers 12 steps in the Kalu ritual that just one occur, or maybe two in the ritual in Ezra. So I don't remember why Liz Fried and other reading Ezra as a ritual quietness, and the interpretation of ritual as a joy, as an excitement, because they didn't believe that this is happen. Of course, it's an option, but it depends on the reading and of the following verse. Ze habait beinehem. So no one could read this word.
They saw it in their eyes.
Yeah. I know how you read it.
הבית הזה בעיניהם. אשר ראו את הבית הראשון, הבית הזה בעיניהם.
Yeah, but
the question is, the הבית הזה is also like.
Okay, I don't know what Jonathan will say methodologically, but I will say the following: if you accept the affinities, the similarity between Haggai and Ezra, and the things that it's there in every word, so look, it's מילה טעונה כאן, look. In Haggai there is מי בכם הנשאר אשר ראה את הבית הראשון מיוסדו, so who you saw the first house, ומה אתם רואים אותו עתה, now you seeing it with your own eyes, הלא חמור כעין בעיניכם, and בעיניכם in biblical Hebrew is something that not of sin, but a cognition. Yet, How do you consider it? So we move to Ezra, ורבים מהכהנים הלוויים וראשי האבות הזקנים אשר ראו את הבית הראשון. So they have seen the first house ביוסדו, on its foundation. זה הבית בעיניהם must, that's what I think, to relate to a cognition, to how they treat it, not to give you a description of the act of seeing. And if I am correct in this, so you must, to complete here, זה הבית כעין בעיניהם, according to Haggai. I think I spent a lot of hours just on this question. That's why I didn't, check your reference to Babylonian sources. I spent most of the time in just judge, and I think that this is the best interpretation that we had to the word זה הבית כעין בעיניהם, or something like this. זה הבית is nothing like in your eyes. If I'm wrong in this,
the opposite.
Yes.
They omitted the כעין because they didn't
maybe,
understand.
maybe. This is the question. This is the question here. Yes. Okay, the interpretation of the crying is almost, I have 4 children. To interpret someone crying, whether it's joy or sorrow or just, it's always a very difficult question.
Crying in Ezra, in Nehemiah.
Yes. Yeah.
About.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, please.
Thank you. First of all, I like this paper a lot.
Thank you.
I try to take notes because I'm that kind of guy, and I had to give up. It was rich in details, so I'm looking forward to seeing this in writing.
Yeah.
But 2 comments, maybe on the side or maybe not, and 1 question, I think. The first comment is World War I
Yes.
got the name World War I first
1920.
sometimes during World War II.
1920,
so you
yes.
have to have a new situation in order to...
1920. This was the first slide in this presentation, the beginning. Evidence that World War I, Cold World War I in 1920. Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Just
okay, that was my first comment. Second comment.
So it was before
before the second. Yes. Yes. Before.
Okay. But was it during
Was
War I?
it?
Was it during World War I?
20 is after.
20 is after.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That was on the side. The
Yes.
second one also maybe on the side. Maybe the title of your paper could be same but different, and that leads me to
Yes.
my question.
Yes.
I wrote as your initial research question. It was who was the first to call the first temple the first temple?
Right.
And my question is who was the first to call it the first temple? I'm trying to finish my notes.
Yeah.
Who, according to
Ezra.
Ezra.
The author of Ezra 3:12.
Okay.
This is the first occurrence of the phrase, according to my knowledge.
Okay.
I need to check everything according, to notes of Itai and Jonathan about the meaning of Rishon, and we think about it. Maybe it's something that has to do with Jeremiah, because Itai said maybe the word Rishon relate to the temple in different ways. So I need to think about it. I'm putting it in the side, but. To make a difference between 2 temples, the first occurrence is Ezra 3:12b. Again, this is the.
Thank you. Then I have that for my notes.
Thank you, Hillel, for this brilliant paper.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, what do you think about what we have in Zechariah with the Hanevim Arishonim? Right, in Zechariah 1:4, אל תהיו כאבותיכם אשר קראו עליהם הנביאים הראשונים לאמור. We have this conception that there is some division in time periods, and there is time period of Rishon, and he doesn't say אחרונים, I think, but we have some sort of a division here. Do you think these correlate, or this is different things?
So I have a friend in the Hebrew University that's writing a wonderful PhD work about Zechariah, Omri Sharet, if you have any knowledge about him, maybe that. And Omri Sharet writing the best PhD dissertation ever written about Zechariah. And I just know what the commentators said about Zechariah, that some of them said that his habits, to quote and to reorder the ancient, it's a way of give dignity and honor to the first prophet. So if indeed this is the case, and the Rishonim is a designation of something that pure, more important, more distinguished, more prestige, or something like this, it's help to my argument about Ezra. But you will say if this is the case in Zechariah.
But this is the time of Haggai. So this is
yeah, but he didn't use this term in relation to the temple. He used this term in relation to the prophecy. And he has a feeling of declination. This is something that he said that I'm quoting, מאלה, ואומר לא אדע מאלה, ואומר לה, לא תדע מאלה, ואומר לא, כאילו, I don't know, I don't see, I am blind. So I think that there is a feeling, something like this about prophecy. And if this concept that make a difference between the first prophet and the second prophets is something that have a deep root in the theology of the Persian period, so we will say that it's something that transformed from prophecy to temple in the 3rd century. I don't know.
Don't bring everything, every Rishon to everything.
Yeah.
Please, yes.
Can we
Final
also ask
question.
can we ask question also to other people?
Yes. Let's conclude. Yeah, well, thank you.
Actually, I want.
Thank you, Hillel, and
let's take just a few minutes to.
Yeah, I actually have a question to somebody who did not give a paper, and but it was the comment that James Moore made about the maaser, the tithe, being the term for Persian taxes paid to the Persian authorities, which he finds in text from Egypt. So it would be nice if you could elaborate a little on that. I know you're also giving a paper, of course, but it's an important question, really, whether the maaser does include.
Well, I think here we should also appeal to our seriological colleagues, because we have all sorts of levels of taxation to deal with there, and the question also should go to our Egyptological colleagues, because the 10th tax, as far as I understand, is developing well before the Persians in different locations. And it is just a basic rubric for taxation. It's the easiest rubric, and it does appear in Egyptian sources before the Persians show up. Its appearance in the Aramaic sources is, at least in Egypt, the clearest example is actually on the palimpsest of the Ahikar manuscript, where it is extracted from the Phoenician and Ionian ships coming in, which is kind of also nice to understand how the Mediterranean market economy works and the Phoenician extraction of taxes at Phoenician city-states in the Eastern Mediterranean under Persian control. There seems to be a correspondence there. But
what is the Aramaic term?
Asratha. And it's collected in conjunction with the Mandatu tax, which in Aramaic there's some question about what the Mandatu means. It means in general terms some kind of just rent. And in this case, for the trading industry, it probably means the rent that allows them access on the Nile with the protection of the Persians to engage in business in Persian Egypt, if that makes some sense. And the 10th, though, was just the state tax pulled out of their boats as a different category. And so the idea that and I mean, this is in relation to Jeff's paper, and the silver industry, it's really Henry Colburn that has worked out most of this, what's going on monetarily in the Eastern Mediterranean. And I'll show pictures tomorrow of some rather famous vessels, but it seems that there were also this Persian established mints for silver in the provinces. These mints would then produce vessels that were used in temple ceremonies, and so they were subsidized by the Persians, and as part they were also extracted back out of the temples and given at different levels of administration, from the district to the province, and then ultimately to Persepolis, because it's the same vessels that appear in the Apadana. And then we have them in votive temple settings. And we have at Elephantine what seems to be a number of references to these things. So I think Jeff's point, though, is absolutely one that needs to be considered. We don't really know what's happening in Yehud, and we don't know if there's any special deals to be made there. But I think in general terms, it's also a possibility that the prophets are upset that the Persians are taking taxes from the temples, which is...
I'll also just add that Michael Yersa has complicated this issue in relation to the Neo-Babylonians, and there's questions about the continuity between Neo-Babylonian practice and Persian practice. Alain Bresson also has a nice overview, a kind of synthetic treatment of this material that's worth looking at as well.
Well, to me it boils down to the question whether the temple in Judah was a text collection center.
Right.
A Persian text collection center. And that was their interest mainly that they had for them. And of course it's nicer to give to God than to give to the emperor, even if it ends up in the case of the emperor.
What else were ancient temples submitted for?
Well, there were also other things, but sure.
Any further comment on that? Well, thank you so much. I think it was really a very interesting session.